We go. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And joining us today is a guest I am very excited to have here on the show. Now, my guest today has always had a love for books. Since he was young, he collected nonfiction books about religion, ancient and medieval cultures, and the wars and warriors that shaped the world. He dedicated much of his free time to studying martial arts, military tactics, and the great battles won and lost throughout history. His favorite cultures to explore are Roman, Japanese, Mongolian, Norse, and medieval history in general. As the youngest of seven, he has many fond memories of sitting around a campfire with his family and being infatuated with stories of courageous men doing heroic things in history. He's also enjoyed reading fantasy books and exploring creative worlds, especially those with intricate stories of boys becoming men, fierce warriors, and great leaders, as depicted in his collection. And after marrying his wife, he was introduced to the world of Dungeons and Dragons, where he found an outlet to use his creative knowledge of historical conflict to weave intricate storylines and quests for his players. The variety of co-creating, and interactive story with others was always a thrill for him. However, as a busy father and businessman, he found it difficult to play regularly and became frustrated by the unresolved storylines floating around in his head. And with the birth of his children and his drive to embody strong protective roles needed, my guest today's stories combine with the real world tragedies and the ugliness of trauma, especially trauma inflicted upon youths and specifically children. So as a result, my author today made his mission to create stories that sort of, as the way I can say without getting emotional, that really fight back against the atrocities and the ugliness, and showing the side of characters that we all love to see, the heroic characters saving the day and doing away with evil in all of its shapes and forms. And without further ado, I'm so proud to have this guest on my show. Everyone, let's give a huge round of applause to today's guest, Mr. Easton Thomson. Easton, welcome to the show.
There you go. I love it. Thank you for
Awesome.
the introduction. I really appreciate it.
You're
I haven't
welcome, Easton.
I haven't had my bio read to me in a long time. That was forever ago when we wrote that. So that's awesome.
Thank you, Easton. Thank you. And honestly, I am so excited to dive into the world that you've created, as well as the behind the scenes of how the story came about and the direction you went with your storytelling, with, of course, the real world scenarios and incidents that are happening in society. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about you, Easton. Is there anything that you would like to share with our viewers and listeners that wasn't mentioned in the introduction?
Well, I think the most important thing for people to recognize is the reason I decided to be an author isn't just to fulfill a dream that I have to tell really exciting stories about true heroes, exemplifying true manliness, masculinity in a healthy way, true feminism in a healthy way, the way that nature intended it to be. But in all truth, the reason I chose to become an author is because I see a big problem happening in our culture, and it's affecting kids. And the war that we have on our culture, the tearing down of our old standards, is drastically putting a lot of children in danger. So, and you'll see how it all connects. You'll see how that happens in the story. But at the end of the day, I'm not writing this for me. I'm writing this to make a difference for those vulnerable children who are being trafficked. And I want to open up the eyes of regular people who have no knowledge, no experience with the subject, so that they can understand, how, number one, how they can make a difference, but also how they can, and also how they can fight it, and why they should fight it.
Fascinating.
How they can care more about it. So you'll see a lot of those conversations happen in the story itself. But that's my biggest thing.
Awesome, Easton. Awesome. Now, without giving too much away of your story, what can you share with our viewers and listeners as a little teaser, a snippet into the world that you are creating?
Yeah. It is a very, so if I could compare the story to a movie, I would compare it to the movie of Braveheart or Gladiator. You're going to have
Ooh,
a
nice.
very similar call to action. So you have a person who is a very, trying to pick my words carefully here. You have a person who is a extremely strong warrior, and he has gone through tremendous trauma and
Hmm.
extreme loss. Um, he is exposed to this dark reality where people in high positions are taking part in these ritualistic abuse uh, cults that
Right.
happen. The elites are, ritually abusing these children, other humans. Some of them are women, some of them are people, but they really want the kids. And because of the trauma that he experiences early in his life, where he and his sister are basically swept away from society and they're stuck in the wilderness, and he, as an 11-year-old boy, has to take care of his baby sister, who's probably about 8 weeks old,
Mm.
and they have to figure out how to survive. So he becomes extremely attached to her, and then later in his life, he becomes a berserker. And as he's fighting in these wars, he encounters these dark things that are happening, and they're happening everywhere. It's not
Mm.
one specific person, it's not one specific area. It's something that's really spread out. Touching people that you expect, touching people that you wouldn't expect to be involved in these rituals. And because of his sensitivity to children, he goes berserk and he goes to war against the elites.
Mm.
And it's a story very similar to Braveheart. Braveheart, William Wallace comes home. He's not necessarily looking to fight the English. He's looking to settle down in his home country. And then when they kill his wife, he's like,
All goes downhill from there.
I'm in. And it's very similar to with Gladiator. I mean, he was asked to be emperor. Things happened, and then his wife got killed, his child got killed, and then all of a sudden he's thrown into the war. So you kind of have that same similar setup. The reason I named those movies is because you get the same type of character. One thing
Mm.
that my main character and some of the other main characters in my book are very conscious of is principles and morals. So
Mm.
you have a conversation of principles and morals and true stoicism being discussed between warriors, and what's right, what's not right. How do we fight this? And conversations are brought up. I never give the right answer, but I do give a platform for different individuals to speak, and you'll
Mm.
have somebody there that you connect with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now I'm very curious, Easton. So in your bio, as it says that, storytelling has been very integral to your upbringing. Your fathers and your brothers would share stories, and you've also been very fascinated with history, military history,
Yeah.
and ultimately, these have been ingrained in you very early on. And of course, later in life, Dungeons and Dragons with the intricate storytelling aspects and then blending of the two. What would you consider to be your aha moment when you realize that you want to take these passions that you've had and transform them and bring them to life in your own story?
That's a really good question. The they were not necessarily ingrained in me. It wasn't necessarily pushed on me. It
Mhm.
was more like uh kind of like my father and my brothers lighting a warm fire and inviting me to come sit down and figure out who our family really is, right?
Mm.
So it was, like, my brothers aren't really into fantasy, so
Right.
they like history way more. Um, as far as the aha moment, so I have seen and been disappointed a lot in a lot of our modern entertainment. So like Gladiators 2 was an absolutely horrible movie. I thought it was really leveled down compared to the original movie. And then you look at like a lot of the movies today that come out, we have women who are strong, and that's great. You know, I have women in my book that are extremely strong. I have women who are Ulf Hednars, right? The queen of Frostheim is an Ulf Hednar, Moringa. Um, but it's not just about them being strong. They try to be men. So a lot of women in movies, a lot of women in books, they're not just trying to be strong. They're trying to replace men. So, and then on the other end of that, along with that same cultural war, we have this huge community of people in our country, huge people in the world who are screaming at the hilltop that masculinity is toxic, that masculinity is bad, that masculinity is poison. And I have friends who've been affected by that. I have people I know who reject their masculinity because they're afraid of being painted into a bad person. And all of these problems I've noticed because when I grew up, I was raised by cowboys
Mm.
and I was raised on horseback. By the age of 5, I was herding cows in the mountain. We were camping out. You know, I was really familiar with guns by the age of 3. You know, it was not something to be afraid of. It was just common life. You know, you see a deer, you can shoot it if you have a permit, or you know, if your animals are being attacked, you can shoot the predator off. I mean, those are common things that I grew up with. When my dad passed away when I was 9,
Mm.
and after a couple of years, my mom ended up remarrying, and I went to Salt Lake City. And it was extreme. I hate using the word extreme too much, but it was extreme. It was a very stark contrast to the way I grew up raised on a farm to now being in Salt Lake Valley in West Jordan, where you know my friends that I'm making friends with at recess are, they don't know anything about guns, they don't know anything about cowboys, they don't know anything about horses, but their parents are drug dealers. It was a really stark contrast. um that being said, I noticed the shift in entertainment. I noticed the shift in our books. I noticed the shift in what the news people say. And because of that shift, because how stark it was, I've always felt like I need to do something. Like if
Mm.
my father was still around, he'd want me to do something. And I hate being apathetic. I hate feeling like I can't do something. I hate feeling like I'm not qualified to do something. So I stopped making excuses and I started thinking, what skills do I have where I can make a difference? And at first I thought, well, I could do a carpet cleaning business because I'm a hard worker and I can give 10% of what I have to underground rescue. I did that for a little while. I made some donations, but I didn't make a big enough difference for me to feel
Mm.
satisfied, and it left me feeling hungry. And then I thought, I had this idea. I said, I could write a story that reflects true manliness. I've done it a lot for D&D, done it for my wife, done it for my friends, but I could really write a story. And I have the skills. I've been DMing for a few years. I have the skills. I know what those principles are. I know how those men think. I've sat with them around the fire. I've had deep conversations with them. So I'm going to write a book and I'm going to reflect a lot of those old lessons, old stories, old principles that I grew up with, and I'm going to implement them into my characters. The moment I decided to write a book, so I grew up reading Aragon. I really liked
Mm.
Aragon. It's a great book. It's a great book for middle school kids. It's a great book for high school kids, and it's still a great book today. But he came out with a new book called Murtag, and when I read that, I saw him come out with that, and I thought, man, that's so cool, because I remembered Murtag. He's the older cousin to Aragon. He has fought in wars. He has survived being abused and being manipulated by an evil king. I would put Murtag, as far as manliness and survivability and toughness, I would probably compare him to a Navy SEAL, or at least bare minimum a Marine in our time. I mean,
Mm.
this guy has been through wars. He's a dragon rider. I mean, he's spilled blood. He's had people try to spill his blood. He's not a weakling. He has lived on the countryside and the frontier by himself for a long time. This guy is the real deal. When I read that book, the author made him out to be a weakling. and he was complaining, he was whining. There was one scene where he was grabbing water from a river, and the water was too heavy and it slipped, and then he starts yelling at his dragon because he couldn't pick up the water. And I was just like, that is the most unrealistic BS I've ever read in my entire life. That is so uncharacteristic of what he would be like at this point in his life. I mean, at this point, he'd been through, what, 12 years of military service, and he's going to whine about water? I mean, that's just not accurate. So I at that point, that was the point where I closed the book, literally, and I said, you know what? I'm writing my own thing. And that's when I started.
Nice. And I would definitely say it's almost reminds me of another guest I had on the show, Alex, who also kind of said almost the same thing, that for storytelling in particular, that there was like a shift from like the classic, especially if you look at the fantasy genre. Now it has changed over the years, and genres do change, but the elements of storytelling are not the same. And as he said, he wanted to go back to that classic storytelling, at least for him, for his writing. He didn't want to try to be like Tolkien or all the other authors, but he wanted to invoke or bring about that nostalgia that we will be touching on much later. Now, before we dive into the creation of your book, there is a fan question that I do want to ask you. So, do you have a writing ritual or routine for any of your projects?
I wish. That would be nice. No, I have 4 kids. Where this is where the book is right now. So my fans who are watching this they're going to hear a lot about this in some Instagram stories I'm doing after the interview. So the story has been written, the book's been written. I am rewriting multiple scenes, putting in detail, putting in world building, we're looking for changes. This book means something. It's not just a story. This is not just go watch a story at the movie theater, grab some popcorn. Oh, that was a great story, and go home. This is a book where we want this story to linger in your minds long after it's over.
Right.
We want you to experience some kind of change, whether you learn more, whether you have felt something different. And a lot of my beta readers have even testified or even said themselves that they have had that change. They've learned things they didn't know, and it has changed their perspective on things. And that's what we're really aiming for. That won't hit the same if the book isn't high quality. So we are really going through it. When the Kickstarter ended, we were still working on chapter 29. There's 49 chapters. So up to chapter 29 was completely done and completely ready. At today, we are working on chapter 34. So we have made some progress. These are really long chapters. 29 is 12,000 words.
Holy mackerel.
Yes. And you'll notice there's a reason why certain chapters are so long. There are 7 parts to the book, and there are 7 chapters in each part. And so because of that, we have to add details in, and sometimes chapters get smashed together and then I have to write a new one. That actually just happened yesterday. So what was 35 now is 34. And I have to add some more stuff for 35. But we are making it for how long this is, and going from 29 to 34 in like 2 weeks, that's really fast. This is the first time where we've actually been full time. Like, we've been at home, we've been writing, we've been putting in 12-hour days. We're also moving. We're moving to Texas, selling our home, and I have 4 kids. So getting all that together, I don't really have time for a ritual. There has been times when I did have a ritual, and how that started was I would listen to what's it called? Is it called Red Frost Motivation? If you guys look up on YouTube, go look up the poem Invictus. There is a channel that has I believe it's Red Mountain. I can't remember. I know, and then I just kind of click on it and then listen to it. But they have tons and tons and tons of these old poems that convict us. Try to think of another one. They have True Manliness by James E. Clark. And then you can just go on, you listen to those. And what I would do is I would listen to those. And then when I was done listening to those, like I was doing a chore, like the dishes or laundry or exercising, and then when I'm done, I have had their words, their inspirations, their lessons in my head, so that when I go write, I can feel more inspired. There's that, and then I pray a lot. So as I'm writing, I'm praying a lot, hoping that I'm saying the right things, hoping that I'm treating these sensitive topics very delicately and tactfully, because if I don't, it's going to leave scars on people, and I don't want to do that. So there's everything that has to do with abuse, everything that has to do with trauma has to be handled in a way where people can read it and not get scarred from it. But also, they still need to feel some of the pain that the people feel, but it needs to be done in a way where healing also comes. So it's a complicated process. We are very dedicated to quality, and books will come out faster. So once this book comes out, we make sales from it. That means the next book that comes out will be faster because we've had the financial backing to keep me writing. So it's coming.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that, Easton. And that actually kind of leads into the next set of questions. So let's start at the very beginning. So when you were at your computer, or maybe you were at your desk with a pencil and a notepad, and you began jotting down the initial rough outline of this story, you've mentioned before sort of like your plans and your mission for this story afterwards, but in the beginning, what were your goals as the author at that initial stage of the storytelling process? And ultimately, what was your promise to your prospective readers? And has that promise stayed the same as you near the end of your book?
I believe it has. It has stayed the same. This has been a project that's been going on for about 1.5 years since I started. It has, I've been gradually putting more time into it since the beginning. Beginning, it was a hobby. And in the beginning, nobody took me seriously. But then after I had written 60,000 words, and my wife read those 60,000 words, and to keep that in mind, Harry Potter book 1 is 85,000. Okay. I wrote 60,000 in like a month, like 2 months. So when she read that and she saw and she felt the emotion of what I was writing, my wife became like totally committed to helping me and to building this project. So she's behind the social media, she's behind the Kickstarter, she's the editor, she's helped me develop the beta team. She has put in more work than I have into this project, and that has really lifted a lot of burden from me, so I can focus on building the story and building these story arcs. Hold on, did I lose your question? What was your question?
I think you kind of didn't
answer it. To the mission.
Yes.
So the mission, so I'll be honest, the very first mission was not to write about saving kids. The original mission was to write about how masculinity is not a poison if it's done right. Men can become toxic if they're either strong and they don't have any principles, because then they're just totally unguarded, totally untapered or tampered, and they are chaotic. Or if men are weak, oftentimes weak men are more dangerous than strong men, because you don't realize that they're weak men until they cave to something bad. So men need to be both strong and principled. And that doesn't necessarily mean physical strength. That also means strong in any way that allows you to defend your principles. So that was the original mission. It was within days after beginning the writing that I realized this has to be, in order for that mission, that feeling to really come through, these men need to be fighting for something. And
Right.
as I thought about it, I was like, hey, I just thought, what is the most important thing for men to fight for? And I thought country, and then I thought, okay, beliefs, religion, freedom. A lot of that was like William Wallace, right?
Right.
Then I thought, no, I'm a dad. I have 4 kids. The most important thing for me to fight for is my family. And it really it affects things more when
Mm.
it's a child. And I really think that contrast of we're going to show true men and true manliness and their principles, and we're also going to show these horrors of the children that these children go through. And then once those two things connected, the light bulbs, they
Mm.
explode. And that has been the mission ever since.
Awesome. And it almost kind of reminds me of, and I probably add on this a little bit later, but there was actually a book that I would actually love to hear your thoughts on, Easton. If you ever do read it on your own, it's actually called, it's a duology called The Coward and the Warrior by Stephen Arion. I read that book, and it is a turn on its head of the hero's journey. I was blown away by this character where, he was part of this team. As we know, in all fantasy stories, almost like in D&D, you have this wandering band of heroes that come together to fight and take down evil. And then you have the last survivor, who was a child, and he's traumatized. He's got severe PTSD, and he's like, I don't want to be involved. And over the course of the story, you see him being chipped away. That this
Mm,
is a guy who's suffered a lot, but at the end of the day, to his core, no matter if he has gone through some of the most horrible things, he is not going to let anyone go through that on their own, or he's not going to let another person go through the same thing. So if he has to go through hell again to stop it, he does. And it's unapologetic in that hero's journey. And I was so blown away because it was unlike any other character I had ever read at that point. And I'm sure a lot of your beta readers have probably felt the same thing upon reading your story, which actually leads to the next question. So, as authors, we sometimes have this discussion internally of whether or not do we tell people early on they're working on this, or do we let them see the finished piece? Now, as you said, your wife has seen the beginnings and has probably seen most of the story up to this point. But
yeah.
when did you decide to tell other people about it, friends and family, as well as, open the doors to beta readers?
Yeah. I think that happens pretty naturally for most authors, depending on how driven and inspired they are with their projects. When I read mine, I was really excited to get it into the hands of somebody else because I was so emotional when writing it.
Mm,
And because of that emotion that I was putting into it, I wanted somebody to read it and say, hey, that's really good. Holy cow, that's amazing. And that's been, it's that kind of happens naturally. When I first started writing and I had like maybe 15,000 words written, it was more difficult to get people to read it. Like
mm,
my wife read it. She was really excited about it, but she wasn't gung-ho yet. She
right.
wasn't really gung-ho until she had saw the twist. And then when
Mm,
she saw the twist, she's like, oh my gosh, we have to make this a thing. Um, and my beta readers haven't even seen that twist yet either. So I remember
okay.
she saw the twist, and then she came in. Like I was waiting in the other room. I was probably playing a video game or something, and she comes in. She's bawling, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I've never felt this way over a book before." And that was the roughest of rough drafts
Wow.
that she wrote, that she read. So since then, the book has grown from like around 60,000 words. Now we're estimating that by the time we're done editing and finishing and refining everything, we should be around 250, 225, 250,000 words. Really big project. We're hoping not to have it any longer because that
Mm,
just increases printing costs. But um, no, that was getting people. Yeah, so like the earliest that you can have people read your stuff, the better. But
mm,
be really selective
yes.
with who you have. Even later on, I had to learn this lesson the hard way. So I have followers on Instagram. We had reached out to a few authors, and we asked one author, hey, what do we do? What are some good steps? And she says, oh, if you're writing a book, start marketing right away. So one of the best advices I've ever heard or had, because it helped me build an audience to draw things from before I had the published product. So with that being said, I was able to go from my audience and put out an application and ask people, would you be interested in beta reading? And we did that once we had the first 30,000 words completely refined. With that being said, the people who I got about, we ended up taking about 12 to 15, I believe.
Right, not bad.
Not all of them are active, but now we've grown it to be like 20. Those people liked your stuff already. They liked your marketing. They were already interested in the type of book that you were writing. For me, I have written on there that my book's about Vikings who hunt pedophiles. So when they saw that, they're like, yeah, this is the kind of book I want to read. So I got a very wide variety of people who were all interested in that subject, and it really helped refine things. Like I got somebody from Iceland, I got somebody from Scotland. They helped me with some cultural dialects. You don't just want random people. I ended up meeting another author who, through a Discord channel, through Jaden Moss. If anybody knows him, he's on Instagram. She was complaining about how she hasn't beta read anything good in a while. So I said, hey, my first couple chapters have already been beta read pretty well. They're pretty good, so it shouldn't give you a headache, but if you want to read it, you're more than welcome to. And she was not interested in the subject. She was not interested in being helpful. In fact, I might even post this on my stories, but on her message, so when she wrote me back, she literally said, you asked me to roast you, so I did. And I'm like, that is the worst. That is the absolute worst position, or like, not position, but goal coming into a beta reader. Your goal as a beta reader shouldn't be to roast somebody. Your goal should be, let's help the author refine their ideas so it makes sense.
Absolutely.
That's what your goal is. And you do that through criticism. You do that through compliments. And you're always honest, but your goal should not be, I'm going to roast you. Right. And I didn't even read what she sent back to me. I just kind of got after her and was like, that is not how you beta read. That is not what you do. You're not going in there to roast people. So be really selective. Think about people. You want people that read your stuff early on. You want people who will encourage you and people who will most likely like your ideas.
Absolutely, 100%. And before we get to the next question, that really hammers in on this topic, two more fan questions, Easton, that I have that I want to ask you. Yeah. Now, a fun question is, what has been your favorite scene to write in the book thus far? And for the main character, how did you create this figure? What were some of the inspirations? I know you said Gladiator and Braveheart, but are there any specific archetype characters or specific characters in media that you really like, that you felt are like a perfect role model for the main character in this book?
Man, those are some tough questions. So as far as the scene, I have so many. So we actually, through the Kickstarter, we have one of our beta readers named Kimmy. She's going to be an artist. Well, she's an artist, but she is going to be sketching out some scenes for us. My wife and I took 2 hours yesterday going through the book part by part, 7 chapters by 7 chapters, and trying to pick one scene from each chapter, or from one scene from each part. And then we had to narrow it down again. It was so difficult.
Ooh.
It was so difficult to choose because there's so many good ones. And I can't even really do it without giving away too many spoilers. I'll give you one of my favorites.
Okay.
There is a really bad person who really enjoys hurting children and who has made it his career and who has created a very big network through selling and abusing kids. This person is found out. This person abuses his own family. And this person meets a berserker who is extremely, I use extremely a lot, who is very adamantly defensive when it comes to kids. And the berserker, luckily, does not care very much for the law. So on an alignment scale, this berserker is chaotic good.
All right.
He's not neutral in any way. He's very, very, I am a good person. These are my principles. I'm very, he's really calloused in the way he goes about it. And he doesn't care for the law. If the law gets in his way from doing something good, he's going to do the good thing anyway. And when he finds this person, it does not go into the details of the process, but he does blood eagle this person.
Oh.
And then he hangs him up outside of his store as a sign to all of the other, pedophiles that this is what's going to happen to you. That's a very satisfying scene. It's also a very tricky scene because you don't want to be too graphic, but I believe it's satisfying enough.
Yes. And a little tidbit, viewers and listeners, for those who are specialists in the Norse world, and for those who aren't familiar with that and may have seen the show Vikings, Blood Eagle is probably one of the most violent ways to die in the Viking world. Won't go into too much detail because the process is very, very graphic. But if you look it up on YouTube or just research it, it's a very specific thing that is, if I had to compare it, it's almost the same as Vlad the Impaler's impalement of his enemies. It is that psychologically triggering, and it really sends a specific message, which, as Ethan said, that's what it does in the book.
I couldn't think of a better person to have that happen to. And that doesn't happen often. Maybe it should happen more. If it was just me, I would probably have it happen more. But I'm writing for a very wide variety of people. Hopefully not wanting to turn them off by that kind of stuff.
Right.
But my target audience is men who have forgotten what it means to be a man. And when in reality, men were never meant to be these fall in line rule followers. We were never meant to be cowards to the law. We were meant to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost. In the movie Braveheart, it talks about, so one of my favorite scenes, and a scene that me and my dad talked about a lot, is they have this discussion over fighting the English. And they say, we don't have to beat them. We have to fight them. That's what William Wallace's dad says.
Yes.
And I could not hammer that in hard enough. We don't have to win. We have to fight. And that's the take I take with my books, is I will most likely not win. I will most likely not save all the kids I want to save, but I have to try. And I'm going to do that. Before we get into so when it comes to this character, the character was created through inspiration from a lot of other characters. So I talked about William Wallace from Braveheart.
Right.
Mel Gibson did a great job there. We talked about Gladiator. I think his name's Marcus Aurelius.
Maximus.
Maximus. It's been a while. But Maximus is also a very noble character. Surprisingly, there is another character from fantasy that most people probably aren't familiar with that did play a big role in creating my main character. There are two main characters in the book. One is Baldwin, one is Ivar. Ivar is the one I'm talking about right now. He is the main character. He has 4 parts, not 3. With him, the other ingredient to this concoction would be Ulfric or Wulfric the Wanderer from Warhammer. So,
okay.
Are you familiar with that?
I've heard of the war. I'm not as in depth as in the Warhammer lore, but I am familiar with it. Yes.
Yeah. So Wulfric looks he looks like Ivar. He's got the red hair. He's got the shaved head on the side. But Wulfric is not good. He is chaotic evil in his thing. The reason I liked Wulfric is because what happens in his storyline is he ends up offending these dark gods called chaos gods, and they curse him with two things. He has to wander the world and face duels. He has to duel creatures. He has to duel warriors, whoever they pick. Or he ends up getting like pain. The other thing he has a silver tongue. His tongue is actually silver. That's just Warhammer for you. It's very in your face magic. So he has this ability to insult people so well that they are coaxed, almost magically coaxed into fighting him. And the reason I liked him is because he's very brazen. So his brazenness, his in your face, his ability to coax and to talk badly about you. Those are ingredients I chose to put into the main character, because he is in the first book, you see him being very in your face. He's hitting this thing really hard. He's not using a scalpel. He's using a hammer.
Ooh.
So that's the first book.
Nice. Very, very nice, Easton. Now, going back to originally what we were talking about in the beginning, which is, of course, selecting a good group of people, those who are really interested in not only the story that you are telling, but also helping the story get better through revisions and edits, and also, building a platform as an author. This leads to what I call a reflective question. And as authors, we find ourselves in these moments, especially when we're nearing the end of a book. Even if it's not completely finished yet, it's in the back of our mind of, do we publish it or do we just keep it for ourselves? And if we go down the way of publishing and distribution, especially now in the digital age as authors, it is a double-edged sword. On one side, we are able to meet fellow creatives, like-minded readers, and authors who are passionate not only about the stories that we are writing, but also are invested and want to help the story grow. On the other side, as authors I've seen from others who have been on the show, we sometimes leave ourselves exposed to a lot of hate speech, trolls, negativity, everything that can be very, detrimental to an author's self-confidence, well-being, and what have you. And of course, imposter syndrome is always going to be there for authors. I don't care what anyone says, it's always going to be there. So this is a two-part question, Easton. So when you began writing this story, did you ever have those moments of heightened anxiety or imposter syndrome? And secondly, what has disciplined you to continue writing the story beyond the mission, beyond the goals, beyond all the stuff you've mentioned previously? What has disciplined you to continue writing this specific story and possibly continuing the story with main character or other characters in future books?
I think that's a great question, because it hits the head. It hits the nail on the head of what a lot of authors feel. So, yes, I absolutely felt imposter syndrome. I actually felt less imposter syndrome when I started than I do now. Because now it's becoming real, and I'm realizing, man, this is going to become a real thing, and it's going to be in the hands of a lot of people, and I really hope it's good. I'm not a professional author, right? I am a professional storyteller, and that's the way I take it. I have faith in the message. I have faith in my team. And honestly, when you guys read it and you're touched, a lot of it's not necessarily because of me. It's because of the team I have behind me. It's because of beta readers, because of my wife who edits. You might even noticed during this interview, I use words repetitively, right? And a lot of people do. That's something that I'm working on with being an author, is you can't use words repetitively. You have to really strengthen and branch out. Word Hippo is a phenomenal resource to exchange words. But no, I do. Yeah, occasionally. What helps me get over imposter syndrome is my beta team. So I go back and I listen and I read what they say, and I have people from all over the world. I have a person in South Africa. I've got people from Scotland, people from Iceland. I have people from Texas. I got people all over, and they all say very similar things and things that they like. And the criticism has been pretty light, which I'm happy about. It's good to hear. Occasionally it'll come up where things just don't make sense, so we have to go back and add detail or add a description, because we want to make sure the world feels real. We want the world to also feel relatable. If you don't relate to the world, it's not going to mean anything to you. So it's got to be a fictional world where magic happens, but it's relatable to our world. Otherwise the story won't make any sense. So we're really focusing on details. We're really trying our best to do the best thing. How will it turn out? How will it be received? We don't know. But I hope that it gets into the hands of people who need it. And I hope that it makes a lot of sales for me to keep writing, and also for me to donate. Every book we sell, every hard copy, not hardback, but physical copy of the book that we sell from our website, we'll donate $1 to Lantern Rescue. That will be ongoing. So we really want to make a difference. We hope we make a difference. We have faith in the story. Do I ever have doubts about the story? Of course I do. Of course I do. That's why I go back to my wife. I go back to beta team, and I say what's bothering me, and I have to describe what's bothering me, and I have to say, okay, so this last week I had I had to rewrite the currency for the world, which when I started the process, I didn't realize how much went into the currency and how big of a deal the currency is, because a lot of it's geopolitical. A lot of it has to do with trade. A lot of it has to do with money. Money is the resource that people are after. Either you're doing the abuse for power because it has ties to dark magic, or you're getting paid. And a lot of that gets played in. So I had to go back and I had to rewrite and reorganize the currency. And so we're paying attention to details. We're asking the right questions. We're looking for questions. We have a whole bunch of people's eyes are on this book. We're looking for quality. Are there moments of doubt? Of course. But going back to my team helps to remove that.
Absolutely. That's incredible. And to talk about, your team and, the creation of the story, something that we're going to be touching on when we get to the business side of the interview. And before we get to that, there is one other question I did want to hear your thoughts on, Easton, because I love asking this particular question because it brings a lot to the forefront. And that is, of course, the discussion of whether or not in this day and age we are in a golden age or renaissance. Now, for context for this question, a guest on my show not too long ago posted that during the lockdown years back in 2019, 2020, it was a breeding ground for creatives to really find their talent and to bring it to the forefront. You had independent authors, new musicians, new artists, new content creators, what have you. And it's increased over time. But after now about good 4 or 5 years after the lockdown, it's really begged the question, are we truly in a renaissance or a golden age? Some say that we are because there are new voices in the industry, but some say that we are not because, in their opinion, while there are new voices, the stories that they created did not push the scholarship or the art of storytelling. They just exist in the void. And some have even gone further and say that we are actually in a pseudo dark age, referring to the rise of AI entering the publishing world, either for AI narration or AI being used to write books and sort of mass producing stories. As one of my guests said, that AI has now made storytelling more mass produced and losing that artistic nature that makes storytelling so incredible. So what are your thoughts on this discussion, Easton? Are we in a renaissance or are we in a pseudo dark age, or possibly somewhere in the middle?
Well, that's a great question. So when you said that creators and creative people kind of found their spark in COVID, that that's absolutely true, because that I was doing a ton of D&D planning. During COVID, I was locked in a closet for my job. So I was working from home, and I was a pharmacy tech supervisor when working for Amazon. And I was on the phone, I was handling escalations, I was doing team trainings, but everything was at home and it was slow. So a lot of the time I was playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and I was
Love
putting
it.
hours into that thing. I've always loved Vikings. Are you kidding? For people who don't know, so my last name is Thomson, which means I got Scandinavian in me. Going back through my family tree, I can actually trace my lineage back to Ragnar Lothbrok on both sides of my family. And I've done it 3 times from my dad's side, and then once from my mom's side, because my mom is German. So you go through German, you go through the Grimshaw royal line, and then you can find Ragnar Lothbrok. So my family's always like, when I talk about like campfire stories, it wasn't just like cowboys, because my family were cowboys, but a lot of it was also Vikings, and we're talking about the different Vikings we related to.
Right.
And that was, Ragnar got brought up. So I knew about Ragnar even before the series came out. So yeah, that definitely played a part. Being locked in the closet is one of the worst things you can do for a creative mind, because
Yes.
all you want to do is expand. So as far as like Dark Age, I don't know. I really hope that we're not going into Dark Age, because AI sucks.
Yes.
AI is not very good. I've asked AI questions. Like, I was playing with it with currency, saying, okay, what's the value typically for an exchange rate between 1 ounce of gold and silver? And it wouldn't give me a straight answer. And the reason, I don't know, I think AI has potential. I really don't want AI to be the one that is driving the entertainment or writing our books for us, because it removes the fundamental importance of those things.
Yes.
I mean, where would we be as a culture without Iliad and the Odyssey from Homer, right? Where would we be without Beowulf or King Arthur? Those are some of the earliest works. You go back to the Viking sagas and you look at Brudvar, and how he was one of the first berserkers who was cursed by a witch, and he fought for his father's army in the form of a bear. I mean, these are things that inspired fantasy. These are things that inspired Tolkien. And it's like passing a torch down. I don't want to pass that torch to a computer. I think that torch is sacred. It's a storyteller's torch that we've been passing down, father to son, people to people, generation to generation. And it shouldn't ever rest in the hands of a computer. I think AI, ChatGPT, is great for asking scientific questions and asking like monetary value, but even then it's not accurate.
That's true.
When I was asking about the exchange rate between, so I have a silver coin, okay, and my silver coin, I wanted to be related to, I can't remember what the coin was called for England. I know that they have the penny, but it wasn't a pound. It was about the same thing as a pound, I believe. But it's called a lunar. So in Abathraxia is an empire that's made up of 7 kingdoms, and they have all split up since the fall, but they've kept their currency the same because it makes things more simple with exchange rates. So they just kind of keep it the same. But I was asking about like lunar to a guild, which is a gold coin. And at one point it was saying the exchange rate would be like 5 to 1. And then another point it was saying it'd be 10 to 1. And I couldn't get it to give me a straight answer. So for one, I question its accuracy. I question its motives. I question, which is weird to say about a computer, but yeah, does it have motives that are pre-programmed? I don't know. But more, I think the most fundamental thing, beyond the accuracy, beyond the motives, beyond all that, is this is a human right.
Yes.
To tell stories. It's a human right to record history. It's a human right to talk about yourself. It's a human right to explain your culture. in a satisfying story. That should never, ever, ever be in the hands of a computer.
Absolutely. And to add to that, a guest of mine said that writing is not an indulgence, it is an obligation.
Yeah.
And that is probably one of the most profound things because it is true.
Yeah.
Writing impacts everything. It keeps stories alive, it keeps cultures alive, it keeps traditions alive. And without writing, those stories would just fade away
Yeah.
into history books for all time. And now we transition into the business side of being an author, which I'm very eager to hear your thoughts on. As a little icebreaker question, Easton, what's probably the most surprising aspect you've learned about, growing your audience on social media and realizing the marketing side of being an author? Because I definitely
Yeah.
feel, as all authors, that's probably the one thing that we can all agree that is not the strong suit for all of us. We are writers, we are wordsmiths, but marketers and business people, we kind of shy short of that unless we already have experience in that field.
Yeah. So the most surprising thing I learned is so if you leverage social media correctly,
Mm-hmm.
you put your face in the camera, you talk about yourself, you take an idea and you talk about that idea, and you get out of being shy. You get rid of the shyness. A lot of authors are shy. I'm shy.
Yes.
Luckily, my wife is smart, and I listened to her, and she got me out of my shyness, which is why I've been able to get the following I have. The most surprising thing is I was absolutely shocked at how much support is out there.
Yes.
How many good people will follow you and help you with your ideas, especially if I don't know. And I think my mission has played a massive role in that. But I mean, Jaden Moss, he writes stories specifically anti-smut. He writes for young boys. Abigail Thomson, I think her last name is Thompson. Abigail, I follow her. She writes. She's also a Christian author. She writes stories about young romance, YA romance, which is very clean. Whereas YA romance today, if you go to Barnes and Noble, you're going to find a ton of smut, of absolute
Yes.
ton. Way too much. Any is too much. There's way too much, especially for YA. So that being said, I really encourage authors to get out there because people are out there who are willing to help you. People are out there who are interested in you. You'll increase your book sales. Get out there because you need a team.
Yes.
It is
That
a
is
big
very
project.
true.
It's an absolutely big project, and you're going to need the beta readers. You're going to need ARC readers. You're going to need artists. You're going to need editors. I have Justin Greer. I believe his last name is Greer. He is a beta reader of mine, but he also helps edit. So my wife does all these edits, and she's so detailed. And then we pass it over to Justin, and he has like 200 things, grammar things that he finds, like not capitalizing a first letter, leaving out a period. We're like, how did we miss that? And he's phenomenal. He is phenomenal. People are out there willing to help you. People are out there who are interested in you. Just got to get your face up there.
Absolutely, 100%. And this kind of leads into another question that I had, just looking at the questions right here, sorry. And that was, of course, as authors, we find ourselves, really trying to figure out, what kind of books we want to tell, and also who do we want to market towards. And with that in mind, as authors, we do realize that, are we writing for the target audience or are we writing for the specific readership? Now, I know that you mentioned that you had a specific readership in mind, but I'm wondering if that sort of came about after trial and error, really hammering it in. And ultimately, in your opinion, what do you think is preferred, the target audience or the readership?
Target audience, 100,000%. And that did not come through trial and error because most of my beta readers are women. And they love the idea. They love the story. They are super fans. of the characters, and they are getting into the romance, and they're super fans of the romance, and they love it. So this is something that my wife taught me. She is very good at social media. If you don't have a target audience, you are not speaking to anybody.
Mm.
If you try speaking to everyone and you try being inclusive to everybody and everyone's ideas, in reality, you're not speaking to a single person. But if the more detailed you can be to who you are speaking to, the more strong your audience is going to be.
Yes, that is very, very true. And this kind of goes into this really important discussion of understanding one's voice as an author. And I've realized that as authors, we find ourselves in this tightrope balance of our individuality, but also understanding the stories that we've loved growing up and the genres we are writing for. Because I think it is important for authors to know that if you're writing for a particular genre or writing in a specific genre, know that the readers that are already in that group has specific expectations of how a story is supposed to go. And you're absolutely right. You're not going to cater to everyone. You're going to maybe cater to a small few. And this is where, as authors, we really have to find this balance. We don't want our story to be so familiar that it's a carbon copy of something else. But at the same time, we don't want it to be completely new, because if it is completely new, the reader's going to be confused, are not going to follow along, and they're just going to say this book is a DNF, did not finish, which no author wants to have that, especially for their own book. And I think ultimately understanding ourselves come from the people that we associate with. So in your opinion, Easton, do you believe that networking with other people helps authors find their voice in the publishing world? And for you specifically, do you feel that you are the kind of author you are now as opposed to when you started on this journey?
I don't think it's healthy to have your voice influenced by the network.
Mm.
Your voice needs to be something that you develop on your own. You need to be meditating. You need to be praying. You need to be self-introspecting on what you want to say to the world. That should not, and if it does, it should be very little, be influenced by your network.
All right, that's
Does
fair.
that voice get refined over time? Of course it does. It becomes you can't go ahead and you write the first 1,000 words, and you're probably those first 1,000 words are gonna be looking different than your 200,000 words. But your voice should stay relatively the same, and it's mostly just refinement. Your voice
Yeah.
becomes more refined in its implication in your story. It is absolutely important to have a voice and
Yes.
to know what your voice is and to speak up on behalf of your voice.
Yes. And also on the topic of networking, which you're absolutely right that, as authors, we shouldn't be totally influenced by our network, but maybe we're fine with some guidance here and there.
Of course. Yeah.
But on the topic of network, I think that's also a very important tool for authors to really explore. So, in your opinion, when should authors really begin building their network team? Beta readers, artists, editors, potential narrators, and stuff like that.
Yeah. So for beta readers, you probably want to wait until you have at least a good chunk of the book done. Better if it's all the way done. With us, the book was done. And then we thought we're going to put some meat on this and, refine it and add a little more detail to the world. And then that refining took time. So I wish we had probably done more refining, but the beta reader, I'm actually glad we did the way we did, because the beta readers really helped in that refining process. But yeah, for beta readers, wait until you're done with the book, because you need to have them, you need to give them something. As far as advertising your book, you should do that immediately.
Mm.
Yeah, that's going to get you an audience. That's going to give you access to narrators. So I have a narrator named Kyle Snyder.
Ooh,
He
okay.
is wonderful. He's a voice actor. He found me and offered to do some free clips from my book. You can go to my YouTube channel, Easton J Thomson, and you can look at this. I think it's 7 minutes. It's a 7 minute clip. And you know what? That's actually another favorite scene of mine because it's not a spoiler anymore. So that's a great scene. And he nails Baldwin's voice. Baldwin he's also a berserker. You could also call this book The Tale of Two Berserkers. So there's a
Ooh, all right.
Peralta who has no memory of who he is. He's kind of washed up. He's a bounty hunter and he's working in a foreign country. And then you have the story of Ivar, who later becomes a berserker and he fights in his country. And they're both fighting similar problems. So Baldwin he's teaching his son how to smith. And that's the scene that you get, but he's doing more than teaching him how to smith. He's teaching him how to be a man and why this matters. People will find you. Getting back to your question, people will find you. You want to just get your face out there, do some work, and stop being shy, and you'll find people and you'll network with them. And it's okay to have, obviously be influenced, having your mind changed. If you refuse to have your mind changed, then you're just stubborn, right? But you really want to be careful you're not copying, pasting what you're hearing from the world and adopting that as your own voice. That's not good. So, and I think you mentioned this too. You mentioned that you don't want to be too original, but you also want to be have some genre in there. In my opinion, genre, you want to have your message first, and then if the genres make sense,
yes,
that's
that
how
is very true.
That's
that is
how
very, very true.
So you'll see Dragon Riders. I love Dragon Riders. Are you kidding? Dragon Riders are the freaking coolest things ever, and I wish we had more of them. So you'll see them. They don't come until book 3, but you'll see them. With that being said, a lot of, from what I heard and seen from the publishing industry, when they're with their authors, they have their authors and they go almost strictly from genres because they equate genres to book sales, and I don't like that.
That is very true. That is very, very true, Easton.
Seems cheap.
And yeah, that is very true. And as we arrive at this final question, I just want to say that this has probably been my favorite interview thus far for the month of July. I've enjoyed every minute of it, and I'm so sad that we have to end with this final question. But I think this question is a really good one, and it's this. Well, context for this question. I've been doing this show now for about 6-7 years. I've interviewed now about almost 160 authors from different genres, from different stages of different publishing styles. I've learned a lot from all of my guests that I've had on my show thus far. And the one truth that all of us can agree on is that in this industry, there is no guarantee that your book is going to be a success. And it boils down to the two paths that you go down to reach that goal, which is to be an author, to be known as an author. One is dedicated to the art, the other is dedicated to the marketing. And again, the end goal is the same, but the objectives have to be realistic, because the harsh truth of the matter is being an author doesn't pay a lot. It is not a get-rich-quick money scheme. If it was the case, myself, Easton, and many others would be leaving our day jobs and writing full-time, absolutely. But that's not the case realistically. And we really have to understand that. Now, there are exceptions to the rule. Absolutely. And I definitely feel for authors, especially new authors and young authors who want to get into this industry, there's not a lot of really specific courses, or in lack of in some categories. So Easton, let's have this little scenario. Let's say you're at a book festival and you are hosting a seminar, a workshop class with aspiring authors in the room. Out of all the topics that you'll be discussing, what is the one topic you would like to share? Your word of wisdom, your piece of advice to these next generation authors?
I would like to speak about how fantasy can unveil the problems that we're facing in our world today. That's what Tolkien would agree with me on that. Tolkien very much felt that way with the orcs and World War I and his experiences there. But so we're not fighting World War I right now. We're fighting a war against trafficking, human rights violation against children. And it's disgusting because it's not these low-life gangs that are doing it. A lot of it's done and perpetuated by people who govern us. And it needs to stop. So if I had any word of wisdom, and if I wanted to, say will make your book more likely or more likable, is make your book more relatable. So that comes down to finding your voice, finding your message, and allowing your world to exist as a spyglass.
Yes.
So you can peer into the real world problems in a different way. That would be my advice.
Awesome. Beautifully said, Easton. And a perfect ending to this incredible author interview here on the show. Thank everybody for joining us today. A huge thank you to Easton for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. Now, Easton, where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out and connect? Is the Kickstarter still alive? And when can we expect any more updates of your book?
Yeah, so I'm going to be doing updates weekly. We've been house shopping in Texas, so I've missed a couple weeks, and I apologize. You'll see updates on Instagram, not on TikTok, but you can find me on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. Just type in my name, Easton J. Thomson, and you should be able to find me. The more, if you want, it's kind of weird. So TikTok, I don't talk about the book that much. I tried, and it wasn't very popular. So on TikTok, you're going to see dances. That's what I do. Am I a good dancer? No. No, I'm not. But do I do it? Yes. Do people love it? Of course they do. Does it get my book out there? Absolutely. And is that what's important? Of course. So, yeah, I'll dance for you. It's fine. I'm not very good at it. The book is better. But the Instagram, you'll see dances, but you'll also see more lives. And you're going to see more stories, and it's way more intimate on Instagram. But you can find me Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, just with my name.
Awesome. I'll link all of them below in the description of this video. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another amazing author interview here on the show. A huge thank you to Easton for coming on the show, making his official debut. Hopefully, this is not the last time. Hopefully, we'll have him back for book 2 and book 3 of his universe that he is creating. And as always, viewers and listeners, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe down below to stay up to date with all new episodes coming out next week and the weeks after, as well as my website, which will be launching hopefully soon, as well as beta reading applications for my 4th book, Decimus, the Wolf of Rome. And as always, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out, wishing you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you all next time.